first hour. So just a heads up.
Awesome. Thanks for the heads up. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks.
Jay was and possibly is frantically searching for their phone. Not sure if they've, I imagine they have because they messaged me, but I never know. So they should be with us very shortly. Do we get Rabbit from the start? That's exciting. We get you from the start.
Oh, there's
and
Jay.
there's Jay.
Hey, Jay. Hi, Rabbit. Hi, everyone.
Friends.
Hi.
What do you want
Yeah,
my
so
name?
we're just, pardon?
What do you want my name to say? Pronouns?
Yeah, pronouns would be great if you're able to. I can also add mine. There we go.
Oh.
The YouTube is up. Oh, yes.
Oh.
The YouTube is up. So I'm just gonna say, for anyone who's tuned into the live stream portion of things, hello. We're just getting ourselves sorted. We have one more panelist coming. And we'll get going soon. Jay, yes.
Mitcholos might be running a bit behind. They say they're running on crypt time. So we don't have to wait for them. I'm not sure exactly how long they'll be.
Okay. It's a casual hangout chat. So that's totally fine. It would be fine even if it wasn't. Thanks for the heads up. It's very convenient to have Crips who live together.
Yeah.
That's almost like our situation.
It's yes, very much so.
Well,
Fenrir and I are roommates for anyone who's unaware.
how do I put my pronouns in my little name?
So if you
I don't know if you can do it
right-click-
if you're on your phone.
Oh, on your
Oh, I'm
phone?
on a computer right now.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
So if
Go
you
ahead, Fen.
right-click on yourself or hit the three dots, it will have rename is at the bottom of the drop down.
Okay. I see.
Add your pronouns there. Just saying a hello to G. I know you're not going to say hi back by voice, but hi, I'm really glad you're in space. And thanks for giving us this crypt space to like hang out and chat and exist. I know that
Sorry.
you've expressed you like it. We do too. I guess it's 5:01, so we can have a formal start. I am Chiu. If you've tuned into previous filibusters, either this year or last year, you've seen me. I use they, them, or it pronouns. I am on the land of the Chiquayak and Palaut tribes of the Stelo Nation, and I'll be your friendly facilitator / host tonight. I have a migraine, so we're really working on crypt schedules, crypt existence, as always. I'm going to maybe have each panelist introduce yourself. If you're able to give your name, what pronouns you want used in this space, with intention, and what you would spray paint on Parliament if you could. And maybe we'll start with Sunny.
Can someone else go? My audio died for a second, so I don't know the full thing I need to say. So sorry.
Totally. Can we
Cute.
start with Rabbit then?
You definitely can, but I also definitely missed a glitch.
It might have been on my end.
We love I'm Rabbit. Pronouns are they, them, theirs. And what? I am coming to you from what is known as East Van, on the unceded Coast Salish territories, recognizing the Musqueam, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Kwantlen. And I'm really, really happy that I get to have a little garden and grow little bits of food and eat them aggressively directly at the garden in a threatening manner. What did I forget to say?
What you would spray paint on Parliament if you could. I really
Mm.
appreciate yours, so I definitely want to hear it again.
It's land back. It's land back
Yes.
because they are not ready for this conversation. And they need to start with the fundamentals.
Totally. Thanks, Rabbit. Can we come back to you, Sunny, with your name, pronouns, land, and Parliament spray paint?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me. Usually I'm live tweeting, but this time Paulina or Willem on Twitter is taking over for me. So big shout out to them. And yeah, my name is Sunny. I use they and she pronouns, and I'm calling in from the stolen and unceded territories of the Musqueam and the Tsawwassen nations. And I'd like to spray paint if we're not safe, you're not safe either on Parliament. And my sister did remind me that that's a bit of an edgelord thing to spray paint. So I want to clarify that, like, it's not an active threat, but it is an acknowledgement that, like, any sort of eugenics, any sort of genocide that starts with disabled people never just stops with disabled people. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sunny. Really good reminder. Yeah. Rainbow, you want to give your introduction?
Hello everyone, my name is Rainbow. I use she and her pronouns. I'm coming from Scarborough, just east of Toronto. I'm still learning about the land names. I'm so sorry. Like I love to learn everything about the land and the stolen land. I am doing pretty good. I just finished 8 hours of like turning my house upside down and cleaning.
Damn.
Like 8 hours, like it was tremendous.
Mhm.
And what I would spray paint on Parliament building is I would probably be artistically and say poverty sucks. Let's make it more accessible for low income.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, poverty sucks. Absolutely. Thank you. Also, we're all at different points of like learning about the land that we're on. And I really appreciate you saying that like you're still in a process of learning. That's really good to like name. Do you mind if I give like my understanding of what like who to pay homage to when we're talking about Toronto?
Sure.
Cool. So there's a lot of nations that have been caretakers of the land that so-called Toronto is on. You've got the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And now, of course, it's, you know, thriving urban native cultural center. So yeah, like super respect and appreciate that we're all at different points of learning and understanding. Jay, do you want to introduce yourself for this broadcast?
Yes. Okay, so it's name and pronouns. So I'm Jay. I use they and he pronouns. What else am I doing?
The land that you're on and what you would spray paint on Parliament if you could.
Right. I'm on the unceded and stolen land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, CKA Vancouver. I would spray paint Abolish Canada. Also,
Totally.
Are we doing a physical description of ourselves?
In my migraine fog, I forgot to say that. As we are coming back to each other in this casual space, please do give a brief visual description of yourself. Absolutely. Jay, you can, since we're
Okay.
still
We'll go
spending
back
time
there.
with you, you can do that.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a young white trans person with green hair, piercings, a scruffy beard, and I'm just in my kitchen.
Hell yeah, kitchen talks. I'll just do my visual description while we're here. I am also a young white person. I have a facial tattoo, and I'm wearing a toque that I made, I crocheted. And I'm sitting in my room, and on my wall beside me, and I just want to point this out because it's fun, is a queer newspaper that has an image of a hand in a fisting pose, and underneath it says resist. And I think that is, great. I think that queer iconography is great.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah, as we're coming back around to folks throughout conversations, I will give a reminder for visual descriptions. Thanks for flagging that, Jay. I do want to say that we are, having a casual hangout conversation with kind of focus on poverty and disabled joy and survival and bitterness and anything else that comes with those things. Yeah, it's meant to be like a really low-key space. And we can venture into various topics and talk about how the filibuster has been going for each of us, what poverty means to each of us if we want to get into that. But yeah, it's really just a laid back space to be disabled and to hold each other with care and intention as we're able to come together, because we haven't had much of that kind of casual space for this filibuster. It's all been very much panel talks, which are great. I've personally learned a lot, but yeah, it's nice to have some casual disabled joy and survival as well. With that said, does anyone have something that is kind of pressing for you, or that you wanted to express about things that you've been learning about disability, things that you've been learning about yourself, or ways that you've been seeking connection and crip grace, maybe, or thoughts jumping off places for that? As I said, I'm going to keep repeating it. I am in migraine town, so I'll be kind of holding the container for these conversations, but I'm definitely not going to be leading them. Yeah.
Silence.
This is the best part, right?
Yeah, I think things I've been thinking about have been how interconnected poverty and intergenerational poverty and trauma all culminate with disability, and placing the vulnerability on people in those communities, as well as for myself, how that connects to being queer and trans, accessing healthcare or lack thereof. but also holding the fact that I do have a lot of privileges navigating these systems as like a white person, despite being queer and trans and like visibly so.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, that like intergenerational poverty is really interesting to me. Like, what do we do when we don't have like family and generational networks to fall back on? I've been in a bit of a weird place for that. But yeah, does anyone want to speak to that idea of like intergenerational poverty, intergenerational trauma, and how it's informed by and informs disability and our experiences?
Mrs. Rabbit speaking. I mean, I kind of want to break down the wall like the Kool-Aid Man when you say that. Because I have so many thoughts. I will detour to do a visual description because I didn't before. So for folks that are having difficulty seeing or maybe are listening over their YouTubes like without watching, sometimes it can be really helpful, and I'm happy to do that. I am a fat black queer. I have short hair and I'm wearing headphones, and behind me there's sort of an amorphous blob in a dark color, and that is a piece of fabric that's wrapped around the back of my chair. I'm in a white room, and on the wall behind me, looking very suspicious and weird, it's just two masks that are hanging up to dry because I try to keep my N95s in rotation so that I don't go through them so fast. And huh?
I'm gonna flag something. We've had a technical glitch, and so people who were watching on the live stream caught all of our introductions in this great first 10 minutes, but people who were attending through Zoom missed all of that, which is unfortunate.
Gotcha.
Do we want to go back and introduce ourselves again? And just have that wonderful crypt redundancy. Do we want to do that kind of briefly for the sake of attendees?
Sure. So my name's Rabbit. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm coming to you from East Van, which is unceded Coast Salish territory. And I recognize the Musqueam, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Kwantlen. And I'm going to give a minute for the interpreter to catch up.
We appreciate our access and honoring the time that it takes.
Truly. And the thing that I would like to spray paint on Parliament is land back, because I think that it's really important to go back to the fundamentals. And I don't think that the people who working in Parliament is such a strange thing to say. The people who take up space, and I don't know what they do there, but I don't feel like it should qualify as work. Parliamentarians are not in a position currently to have a real and informed conversation about the intricacies of disability access. They just don't understand what's happening yet. And it's a shame that they have as much power as they do for as little understanding as they have. And so I think they should start with land back. And that was my introduction. Maybe we can swing back around to that topic later because I was into it.
Yes, absolutely. So we will jump back, say, to Sunny, if you can reintroduce yourself for our attendees who are now in the room.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. And usually I am live tweeting this, but today I am here. So Paulina, also known as Willem on Twitter, is taking that over for me. So special shout out to them. And my name is Sunny. I use they and she pronouns, and I'm calling in from the unceded and stolen territories of the Musqueam and Tsawwassen people. What am I missing? My visual description is I am an Asian person with pale skin, and I have round glasses on and long black hair and bangs. I'm sitting in front of a set of black drawers and a white suitcase, and there's just a bunch of stuff piled up on both of them behind me. And for the Parliament spray painting, I want to spray paint, if we're not safe, you're not safe either. And I just want to clarify that it's not just a very like edgelord thing that I want to say, but also an acknowledgement that any sort of genocide and kind of eugenics that starts with disabled people never just ends with disabled people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for graciously repeating that. Rainbow, are you able to reintroduce yourself kindly here? Getting off the slow crip start. It's all good.
Yes, my name is Rainbow. I use she and her pronouns. I am coming from Scarborough, just east of Toronto. I looked up the things. I looked up the names of the land of Toronto. So I'm actually doing
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm
Learning. Fabulous.
If I can pronounce it properly because of my disability. Sorry.
Mhm.
Wendat, Anishinaabe,
Mhm.
Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Hashinonani. Am I saying this right?
Mm.
Yeah, so that's the line that's stolen from Toronto. Thank you so much for teaching me that too, because I'm like, I like to learn. And
Totally.
I'm a transgender, so I'm a transgender woman. And I have long light brown hair with a little bit of blonde that's fading. A black t-shirt that says "Born to Sleep." And behind me is like a photo of my mom and dad who are now reconnected together and as angels.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that's about it. I have piercings on my lip and my nose and my eyebrows and much more. And some
Yes.
and that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Raven. Jay, we'll come back to you. And maybe when you're reintroducing yourself, you can also maybe, if you're able to, restate kind of the thoughts that you were coming to this with and what you introduced, kind of started our conversation with.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, my name is Jay. I use they and he pronouns. I'm a young white queer. I've got green hair, facial piercings, a beard. I'm wearing a button that says I carry naloxone. And I'm in my kitchen. I'm here on the recording from CKA Vancouver, which is the stolen and unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Did I do them all?
Parliament.
Oh, and my spray paint. My spray painting on Parliament would be abolish Canada. Yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of brought up like how I've been thinking about like poverty and intergenerational poverty and trauma and how that affects, creates and influences disability, and how disability also goes back and influences that. But also keeping in mind like accessing medical systems and like the difficulties in that as like a queer and trans person, but also keeping in mind like the way that my privileges as a white person have affected how I access that care, as well as my relationship with poverty. Yeah, so that's what I've kind of been thinking about.
Totally. And we had gone to a rabbit. You were about to share some Kool-Aid Man wall thoughts with us. coming through the wall as a Kool-Aid Man. There's some big thoughts on those topics if you still want to share them.
I mean, the fact that I have thoughts does not mean that my brain will distill them in any fashion.
Yes, it's true.
I think that I am finding, I'm going to say this in the most positive way. I'm really excited about the skills that disabled people bring to situations And the intergenerational poverty effect is that I have 3 generations of how to act like I'm not who they don't want to treat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a dubious privilege.
Yeah. Dubious privileges. Yes. Just echoing that in my migraine state, I'm like, I really, I really am like, that is quite a reality for when you're navigating medical systems. Is like, I don't remember what I was talking about, but in some chat I was talking about like some similar thing of how oh, it was about like isolating and like the privilege that being able to like isolate during the pandemic has been, and the fact that it means that I've been like cut off from community and these kinds of things. So yeah, dubious privileges, very, very much so a very big reality for many of us, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Other folks?
I had a thought,
Jay?
and now it's
Mhm.
gone. Um, can you repeat like the last little bit, or like repeat as best you can of what you said?
Which of us, Rabbit or
You,
myself?
Q, your response.
Yeah, I was talking about like the privilege of being able to isolate during the pandemic, and the fact that, you know, that's been able to keep me safe from COVID, but it's also meant that I've lost a lot of connections and community, and the way that that is, you know, a privilege of sorts, but
Right.
is also very marginalizing.
Yes, that reminded me of what I was gonna say, which was like yeah, that like privilege of being able to isolate, but how that also comes around and like disconnects you from your like found family, and how like important concepts like found family are for like queer people, but also like disabled people and poor people. Like we really like build these like tight knit communities where we're keeping each other safe and we're sharing in that joy and our company when possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so how
Yeah.
isolation in the pandemic can be really hard in that sense. I totally see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts on intergenerational poverty or isolation or other dubious privileges? I'm totally with credit, but definitely stealing that phrasing, Rabbit, of dubious privileges. It's very good.
It's, yeah, love that. Was there anything like Sunny or Rainbow wanted to add or bring up?
Mm-hmm.
Mood.
Yeah, we're all just trucking along. I do want to remind attendees that, you know, if you have things that you want to talk about, I know a lot of disabled people have experience with poverty and all of its trials and tribulations. So you can put that in the Q&A. Our chat box is restricted, but the Q&A is completely open for you to put thoughts and questions and comments, all of that right in there. Rainbow, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, because I was very honored to be part of this today, and you know, I'm speaking from my experience of living it right now as I speak. Because I know you're talking about like poverty and isolation and to the whole pandemic. As a person, as like a well, yeah, as like a transgender person myself, as the other thing I did the last time that some folks commented on, talking about like healthcare. And the
Yeah,
struggles I face with the mispronouns constantly in the hospitals.
totally.
But poverty, it's extremely sucks, and because of like in general, like with my experience is that being on ODSP, 1 month check a month, and then basically having to pay like market rent and so many bills that I actually need internet, I need a cell, I need, so I can't even afford cable right now. So I just watch horror movies. That's all I watch. And I'm basically in a basement of a house and going and living a whole month with under $30 a month for like transportation. And I have to basically, as a survivor, I have to basically count on like food banks every time, like downtown Toronto, but it's hard to get there with like transportation. And so I had to basically only eat dinner a day and skip breakfast and lunch, which I have lots of medical issues. And beyond hormone therapy, it's a struggling process. So I basically have lots of friends who protest constantly like downtown Toronto all the time. It's called POOF, Protecting ODSP Welfare Funding. And they protest all the time at parliaments and at Queen's Park. And I protest with them all the time. And every time I protest, I just get so angry and like, like, seriously, we need a raise on ODSP. We need a raise on this because everything is going up, but we're not getting nothing and we're not able to buy food. We're not able to look after ourselves mentally. And, you know, with ODSP, it does impact your mental health. It impacts your disability. It impacts how you survive. It impacts everything about you. And then people think that, oh, you have a mental health, you can put up with it. You know, you can get help. No, it's not the help, getting help for mental health services. We need to have like a more raise on our checks. We need to be able to access, you know, healthcare without being discriminated or facing, you know, transphobia, or access to like income, more income. And finding a job out there is extremely hard because some people don't hire you because, oh, because you're trans, or because you're disabled, or because you're not able to stand, or doesn't matter. Like people can work and do what they want to do. Like, you know, like it depends on their talents and whatever they want to do. So it's like, it's poverty, it's like, it's extremely an ongoing issue that made me sometimes feel like I'd rather just like be not alive no more. Or a couple of times I was thinking about MAID. So it's like, I was very happy to be part of these things. And it really struck my heart. Like, just share my experience. And as an activist, I do my best every day to fight. And it's an ongoing battle. Ongoing.
Yeah.
Every single day.
For sure. Yeah. What you said about like having to go through these struggles and it bringing up like thoughts of accessing MAID and these kinds of things, it's really real. And like I think really like the way that our government is willing to fund our deaths over our lives is a very key point. It's a very like it's very relevant to these conversations of like how are we supporting one another and how are we surviving. Like as you said, you're going downtown to protest for like raising the rates in Ontario. And you're doing that because you need to survive, and the people around you and your friends, you all, like everyone, we're not getting enough to survive. And again, like the government is willing to fund euthanasia programs over our lives and our access to food and medication and housing and all of these things. And it's quite dire. I am highlighting Gabrielle brought to the conversations very, very much on this point is Kaylee, who, Kaylee, I'm really glad that you're tuning in. I'm always happy to hear from you. Kaylee said, yes, do please come back to the topic of intergenerational poverty and trauma, specifically also at Rabbit. It's relevant in all things disability. Kaylee says, I shudder and rage at this in the context of C7 MAID being extended to disabled people with mental illness. Yeah, mentally ill people not giving the tools to thrive and to access, you know, any kind of healing or treatment that could be funded and could be made possible rather than again, these euthanasia programs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that directly speaks to what you were saying, Rainbow, of like, yeah, at times you do end up considering things like MAID. And that's quite an indictment of the situation that we're in. Yeah.
I was thinking about how it becomes cascade failure. There's just
Mhm.
there's an unwillingness to see us as whole people in medicine in general,
Mhm.
related to specialists, related to insurance, related to just just separating psych and separating dental.
Mhm.
Like there's just a lot of ways that we're expected to kind of carve ourselves up for them before we get there.
Totally.
But then there's an additional like gap, particularly in healthcare workers, I find, but like it's not exclusive, that any of your problems can be dealt with on their own. Just because I have to see a dermatologist about my skin doesn't mean it's not affecting my mental health. Like there's just,
Mhm.
and it's not like they don't know that. They will tell me that. They will tell me that I need to
Yeah.
care more about all these other things because everything is interconnected. But the
Mhm.
lived experience of the patient in that context is still a separating. And so then we have to do all that work of knitting ourselves back together when we get home from the appointment that's supposed to make us feel better or supposed
Yeah.
to offer us genuine care,
Yeah.
or is supposed to actually prescribe the medicine that only you can give me, but
Mhm.
I'm not supposed to ask for, know about, or research beforehand. And also don't get a
Yeah.
second opinion. I'm gonna take a breath.
No, that's really what you said of like we're expected to knit ourselves back together after these appointments. If we can even get into them, like with, GP shortages and specialists being hard to come by, referrals being hard to come by. And then, yeah, like just so many things are stacked against us actually accessing genuine care, if that's even what's being offered. Like if that's even on the table from this practitioner. And yeah, everything is connected. Like it's our whole body is not, I have a brain and I have hands. Like it's like they're together. They come as a package deal. Yeah. Did you have something, Jay?
Yeah, I wanted to like echo and appreciate what Rabbit said about knitting ourselves back together and how a really important part of like going to a doctor's appointment for me and having all of those inevitable frustrations and feelings is turning to community and turning to other crips and being able to like talk about that and get some validation and all of that sort of thing. That's like a really important thing for me, and I think for a lot of people after accessing this healthcare that alienates us, is like having
Totally.
there to hold us after.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ways that we have to create, again, like with those found families, those found communities, like making those spaces, because they're not, they're not, your mainstream queer spaces are not accessible, and they're not crip or mad friendly. They're very much not created for us. We have to find them and create them, but they're very much like, I agree, they're quite integral to my survival and dubious well-being. Yeah. Rabbit, you I think I'm not sure if you said this, but I think you said that you maybe wanted to come back to like land back, and how the government is not equipped to handle anything more complicated than just giving it back to Indigenous people. And even if you didn't, if you're up for that, I would love to hear any expansion on that you want to offer, because I quite agree, and I always appreciate your insights.
I feel goofy and also kind of awkward because I definitely said that in the, what do they call that, the heat of the moment, but I stand by it with my cane cocked at about 45 degrees. I think that the premise of care is fucked. I'm from the States originally, and I spent half my life. So yeah, I've got about equal amounts of time dealing with the American healthcare system, the lack of an American healthcare system, and what Canada feels proud of itself about. And I definitely got better care in the States, but I had a different set of circumstances. So like, for an example, my father worked in a union in the States. And so for my growing up, we had some healthcare. Wasn't the healthcare that I needed. And it almost killed me. And then we paid out of pocket for the things that would actually keep me alive. But that the consciousness that I feel like people have about Canada, like just go to the doctor, that just exists for you, is like, I think that stays pervasive even amongst people who already know that it isn't true. So like my Crip friends will still be after me to go to the doctor. Like that's a reasonable option. But for a bunch of reasons, it's kind of impossible. My health card hasn't expired. I paid $420 for 3 x-rays of my foot from someone who told me that they would not treat me on the way into the appointment so that I wouldn't get any ideas in my head about asking for any kind of relief. Basically, the paper that they gave me on the way out is exactly what I could have looked up at home for free. And I can't be aggravated at my friends thinking I should go get care. I can only be grateful that they want me to get care, but I know there's none behind the curtains. So it's really hard to screw myself up and bring my courage to go interact with this thing that doesn't really exist, that everyone wants to say exists so that they can feel better about not doing anything themselves about the gaps.
Yeah, that's a really, a wealth of experience behind that. Like Americans already have the knowledge that they're not going to get care in their healthcare system, but Canada has this facade very much of potential care that has no follow through because it's underfunded and undersupported. For sure.
Did you notice what she put in the chat?
Yes, I have a few things that I want to say from the chat. Gabrielle said that Canada doesn't factor disability into the picture of poverty. And according to a new study in social indicators research, so it underestimates the true poverty rate for disabled Canadians. She said, basically, when they measure our poverty, they fail to include the costs associated with disability. which sounds very accurate. It's like that kind of like, we know this, it's helpful to have a study that backs it up, kind of moment that I think we're all familiar with. Like, why is there a study for that? But it's helpful. But like, it's what people with lived expertise and lived experience have been saying.
I've been telling you for ages
sure.
now.
Yeah, we have been saying. There's also, this is off in a different direction, but I think it's a really valuable one, from an attendee, Kim, sent the question. I'm going to read out the whole thing. Kim asked, I meet lots of other disabled people living in poverty in my community, many homeless or at risk of being homeless. I also meet neighbors who don't identify as disabled but are community minded and recognize that people are falling through the cracks and not having essential needs met. And nobody seems to know about what's going on regarding MAID. How to reach and inform people who may not be in online communities and may not have access before they or someone they love gets caught unaware. And that's something that like I'm kind of always grappling with mentally. And Gabrielle, your first thought is also my first thought, and it's I think it's an excellent one, is street art. Like street art is, oh, sorry, there's my brain. That was Fen. But Fen said, first thought is street art. I thought it was Gabrielle because both of your icons are purple, and Gabrielle is really quite often talking about the importance of art in our movements. But you know, we're all just on the same wavelength tonight. Thanks, Fed. Yeah, street art is a great way of increasing community awareness. I know the downtown east side and a lot of places, a lot of community artists, you know, talk about the toxic drug crisis in like murals and stuff like that. I'm thinking of Smokey D specifically, but you know, a lot of folks down there do it. And that's a really valuable way to like engage people is making some kind of community art, whether you do it like on your own and it's solely for like engaging with in that way, or you organize like community events to create art with community members about these topics, and those are times that conversations can happen. Yeah, other ideas from folks?
Yeah, I think Kim's question was really great, and what they sort of brought up, and it made me think about earlier when you were talking about how being able to isolate is a privilege that's isolating you from community. But on the other side of that, there's the people who can't isolate, and so much of their resources have been cut back or stopped throughout the pandemic, which is good to protect the people who can be isolating, but it's creating a lot more cracks for those people to fall through. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And it's hard to like balance those two things and keep them both in like your mind and your heart.
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah, it creates division, which is I think really difficult to grapple with. Even just like internal division of like these people I care about are engaging in things that I can't, and how to, navigate personal choices and collective responsibility and stuff like that, with the ways that people have been left behind and left to fend for ourselves because our government is neglectful. It is not a caring system. And yeah, I very much think that the pandemic response is very much related to the way that MAID and, this euthanasia program has come up in, they put it forward during the pandemic when disabled people were being disproportionately affected by a virus. Like it's not unrelated whatsoever.
Tell you what else is sitting on me that is
Hmm.
not related but related is watching
Mhm.
this conversation unfolding as the states is getting ready to roll back Roe v. Wade.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like we're having all the same conversations about consent except through the looking glass.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's that like personal autonomy versus collective care. Because often a sticking point in pro-made discourse is it's about personal autonomy and personal choices, when there's so much systemic violence that's occurring that they don't acknowledge and don't address. And Roe v. Wade is like um, the side of things that allows for people to make choices about their own body. And I mean, it's really about like the states are allowed to like implement or not implement certain restrictions and whatnot, but like it's all very, very connected. And very much, yeah, it's through the looking glass. Like we've got this warped echoing of experiences across the border. It's
And I just, the border is
surreal.
not even real. So like
It's not even
what
real.
is the conversation happening on the land? Is
Mhm.
who do we get to kill? Is that the
Mm.
conversation this land is gonna have all the way from
Mhm.
like the ocean is creeping in and the land is fighting back, and at the same time, I just sorry.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about yeah, like abortion access and that. But I've also been forgetting to say this the whole time, but like I have Tourette's, that's why I'm making my little um but yeah, thinking about like forcing people to carry a pregnancy to term and the ways that can really force families and that child into poverty, particularly in the States when, yeah, things just cost so much. And like a pregnancy is grossly expensive there. And yeah, just bringing forth that has such negative effects on like community and yeah.
Yeah, it can force a family into poverty, and also like pregnancy can be very disabling and deadly. And then that's like a further compounding factor. I think it was it Tinu um, who was talking about I know Sarah Jama was also talking about this, but I think Tinu also tweeted about it of like these moments are very I have my migraine brain fog just like doubled all of a sudden, but yeah, on these topics of like how these factors are very connected, and yeah, the forcing of poverty and of disability I think is a really salient point. I need to go attend to a bodily need, so I'm going to like take a brief bad host moment and duck out. Does someone want to continue on this topic so that I don't have to fill the silence with my own voice while I'm away?
Well, I was actually going to say that in the Q&A, Tracy had asked about if anyone had thoughts on today being ME Awareness Day. Yeah, opening the floor for that. Q might also have some thoughts on that when it gets back.
I think it's interesting how little we heard about it in social media and about, considering that there are some questions about whether long COVID and ME are related. I think that it's very telling that that's not something that was noticeable in the public sphere.
Yeah. Last night I was having some conversations with you and Q and some other folks about the misconceptions that haven't been corrected about the nature of COVID-19 and how it's not just respiratory and how it can start in other organs and that sort of thing. And yeah, that was news to me. And apparently it had been known for a while, but no one was bothering to correct it. It wasn't convenient to correct. And it's just so much more convenient to glide over those sorts of things and ignore long COVID. And you'll see people recovering like, oh, these young people, these disabled people, they recovered, but where are they going to be in a year, and there's no real thought given to that. And yeah.
I heard your conversations.
Okay, great.
Thanks for bringing that question from the chat into the sphere. Thank you to Gabrielle and Fan for making sure that those are brought to our attention as they come up in the Q&A. And just a reminder to attendees in the Zoom call that you can put any questions, comments, thoughts in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to them. Yeah, for folks who don't know, ME is myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's a medical condition that's characterized by like systemic fatigue and exhaustion. So more than just being tired, it's like being so fatigued that you can't eat, that you can't walk, that you have to like recover in a sensory bubble for a lot of folks. And it's quite a difficult illness by all accounts. And yeah, as Rabbit said, and as Jay was saying, like there's conversation that long COVID and ME may be very closely related. I agree. It's quite telling that it wasn't, super prominent in our experiences on social media. I'm sure people who are primarily in ME circles may have had a different social media experience today, but for those of us who are not, I mean, I know a lot of people online who do have ME, and yeah, it definitely wasn't like pushed content. It wasn't like right at the forefront of social media the way other awareness days can be. I also found that interesting. I want to hear, do Rainbow or Sunny have thoughts or anything to bring to the table? If you don't, it's totally fine. I just want to make sure that we're not, talking over you or neglecting your voices. Yeah. Gabrielle is like kind of talking in my DMs, and she's like, don't quote me on things, but I also do want to make sure that it's aware that she's giving me some direction in my brain fog, which is really helpful to me right now. Oh, this is, and also bringing up some really valuable points that I know some people here have some things to speak on. Yeah, quite a common ME experience, again, by all accounts that I've seen, is the long process of seeking a diagnosis. It's a really difficult thing a lot of people with ME go through, a lot of disabled people in general, especially, being poor, being queer, being trans, that process of diagnosis is like a real hurdle. Like, what does that space between being like officially declared disabled and not kind of look like or feel like? And also, like, I know I have some thoughts on this, but I want to hear from y'all. Like the different dangers and experiences that we have when either we are declared disabled, and like the validating process that is, but also the dangers and fears that come with it versus not being declared disabled by medical professionals or the state, and how that's invalidating, but also can be, you know, a layer of safety in certain ways, especially when we're thinking about MAID and who MAID gets offered to. Thoughts? I know there are some in the room if anyone wants to share them.
I think I want to bring up like the way that different diagnoses sort of get siloed. And I say siloed because it is full of shit. But I think a lot of us, we don't just have, you know, one disabling condition. It's a lot of things. But the way that the medical system works here, they never really see our disabilities as like a multifaceted and holistic thing. And that is really detrimental to all of us because we might have certain diagnoses that we've worked really hard to get. And then there's all the other diagnoses that we still need to deal with, but they're in like a whole different branch of medicine. And then we have to navigate jumping through all those different hoops. And back to what we were saying earlier, like still having to knit ourselves together after that, after having such a traumatizing, re-traumatizing experience of like tearing ourselves open to scrutinize these various things that that we need treated, but it's just considered separate ideas of what's wrong with us, and it's never seen as a holistic experience because they never see us as whole people.
Yeah, very much so. The siloing of our experiences, coming back to that, and like it's come up in multiple different ways tonight, and I think that that's really, yes, it's a sticking point for a lot of us, isn't it? Like how we have to, as you said, like break ourselves apart and re-knit ourselves with the help of community if we're lucky enough to have it. And you know, having gone through periods where I haven't, like what has that process looked like? It's a really big reflection of like, what does the process of being isolated and disabled and having to knit ourselves back together mean and look like, and how does that affect our long-term well-being or lack thereof when we're just really not able to access meaningful care. Jay, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah.
That's my little cue, is whenever someone unmutes themselves, it's like, I have something to say. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So keep it up.
Do I have something to say?
Do you though?
Right. Yeah, tying it to like what Sunny and Rabbit have said about like how fractured and fractal these different cares and systems of medicine are, and how we aren't seen as whole complex people, and having an option to essentially, you know, a state murder really, when we're offered these things at our lowest points, when we're desperate, when we're in pain and we're struggling mentally. Like if you offer it to someone and they say yes in those conditions, when they're past that, if they can get past that, when they have access to proper care and medication, most people probably aren't going to make that choice to die when they would do so at their lowest.
Totally.
And for a lot of us, there's no real getting past a low and getting into a stability. And so that leaves a lot of us feeling like that's an only option. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to bring up with a content note about suicide. And I'll just give like 5 seconds for people who are not in the space for that this moment. But there's a common misconception among abled people, among people who have access to pretty good care, that it's not that different from suicide. And while it is an assisted suicide, it needs to be treated that way from a medical standpoint. It also is not the same as suicide. It is a lot less likely for people to be successful at actually ending their own lives when they're doing it themselves. And I'm not saying that they should. So whatever that voice is. But when the state offers you an absolutely definite, like that one's not gonna fail, and whatever situation you might be able to come out of is no longer an issue. So I think it's really important for people who are in a position of some power to recognize that MAID is not a maybe. There is an inherent amount of hope involved in suicide attempts that is just not part of the process of having that offered to you and legislated okay and societally treated as you're doing something good for the rest of the world by getting out of the way. Like that's so much more than someone in a moment taking a chance on whether or not they survive the worst thing they can do to themselves, right?
Totally.
And I think maybe I will camera off for a second, or like just black out my camera for a second, and then people kind of know that we're not talking about the same thing anymore.
In the chat, Jane, we've got Gabrielle posting from Jane some of her thoughts about.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to read it, or I guess I could read it.
you can read it. I'm loving that. Reading is not my strong suit in migraine town, so please go for it. I've been doing fine, but like if you want to take that, that's great.
Not always my dyslexic strong point, but
Trucking along.
Jane says, I think that some illnesses and conditions sometimes have folks striving for a veneer of respectability at the expense of others. The way autism has such violent fractures at the expense of those with higher support needs. But it was originally perceived as schizophrenia. And then we also often try to distinguish ourselves from cluster B disorders. But all of these distinctions only keep us from seeking an overhaul / abolishment of psychiatric systems, keeping us oppressed.
That's really key. And yeah, like schizophrenia is overdiagnosed in Black men especially, and so it's very, I really appreciate Jane drawing those connections and making that point that, you know, that the siloing effect that we've been talking about of certain diagnoses can often come from trying to adhere to respectability politics, and that is doing violence and like entrenching systemic violence in our communities, when, again, as Jane is saying, like we should and could really be seeking like a complete overhaul of these systems and abolishing like the so-called medical industrial complex and psychiatric systems that seek to penalize us for our madness or our neurodivergence. I really love like capital M MAD communities in particular for looking to be proud of, and really step into the deviance from an oppressive system. Like, you know, some symptoms can be really hard, and symptoms can be debilitating and disabling. But a brain functioning differently from dominant oppressive systems is not a personal failing. It's not, you know, a fundamental wrong way of being. It's living at odds with the ways that the world has tried to oppress us. And I think that MAD communities are really powerful in that in particular. We have a Mitcholos in the house. Really glad to have you here. Yeah, I know you've been in the room for a minute. Maybe you've been listening, maybe you haven't, but we're just keeping it casual, keeping it low key, talking about systems and, you know, abolishing the state. Just noting that we are at 6:10. So we've got just under an hour to spend the rest of our evening. I have a question from Frankie McGee. Frankie says, maybe this has already been spoken to, but I'm curious if folks have thoughts about the ways medical systems and practitioners use people's mental health histories to deny them care for physical health conditions, knowing that, as you say, it's all connected anyways, and how that intersects with poverty, and also maybe how lack of access to care and diagnoses leads to increased suicidality. Frankie gives the caveat, I don't know if I'm making sense. I think you made perfect sense. I followed what you were saying. If anyone in the room didn't, like, we can absolutely clarify, but super on board with those questions. If anyone wants to step into them, wheel into them, limp into them, roll into them, you know, all of our disabled metaphors. Jay, you unmuted yourself. You want to start us off?
Yeah, I think that speaks to me on a really personal level of my experience going through systems where, going through the psych system and being re-traumatized and being labeled as super crazy. And I mean, I am, but the way that then really decreases the amount of care and validity in the eyes of doctors of my physical disabilities. You know, Chiu had to come to a doctor's appointment with me one time and demand that I was sent to the rheumatologist, as my doctor was saying, oh, you should just go to a psych. It's from your mental illnesses. You're not actually physically anything wrong with you. I got a diagnosis on the first appointment from the rheumatologist.
Yeah.
And in the chat again, it was if Mitcholos wanted to do their intro.
Yeah, I was gonna put that out there in a moment, but totally, Mitcholos, if you want to, feel free. Intro things are name, pronouns you want in the space, the land that you're on, and what you'd spray paint on Parliament, if you could so choose.
Sorry, I kind of was like, oh.
Sama sap watu naki tlimaksti. Hitatsu Hiusat Chanothat. Mono 2011. My name is Mitcholos, visiting the Filibuster from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And word I would spray paint on Parliament is a word from my language, not in my specific dialect, but my language. It's Isak. It's respect and care. It's kind of 2 words.
Thank you. Very grounding to hear your voice, as always.
We love you.
Your physical description. Sorry to interrupt you, Q, but
Oh yeah. If you could give a brief visual description of yourself. Go for it.
Skin.
Thank you. Yeah. I've got a fog moment.
well, we were talking about Frankie's question. If anyone else wanted to add to come in and save you there.
We were. Rainbow, I know how you've talked about how your experiences being a trans woman in like the healthcare system have been like very alienating. And I would love to hear some of your thoughts on, if you want to share any, on like how accessing healthcare like impacts your mental health, and what care for you would look like. If you want to offer anything.
Sure. Sure, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to speak, because I did know that I was kind of like listening to everyone else and like observing.
Yeah, I've been like
I felt like
really
so,
appreciating
like
you're a
I'm
very active listener. You're a very active listener like I am. So yeah.
I don't feel like I'm
Thank you.
hiding or something now. Like, sorry, I was like trying to observe everything. I'm like, okay, this is really cool information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So I'll probably say, yeah, like, I say this to all my friends, and I say this out loud on the public so people hear me, and they're like, that's crazy that you do this. Like, I scare people on the phone. Because I'm like, I'm very open and honest and everything. But no, my experience like with accessing like healthcare as a transgender person, I had a really amazing journey, like coming out as bisexual, then gay, and trans. Like I was trying to figuring myself out. It took a long time about, and then just learning about when I was like 5 years old, like trying my mom's bra and makeup and getting more into Barbie dolls. And I was like, oh, my mom's like, no, I think my son's gonna be a girl. So I was there, I'm learning all the stuff about genders and sex and everything. But no, I would love to share some experience, because I also found some more details about the stupid health system. It's just ridiculous. Accessing house, like because I'm in Scarborough, so like the Scarborough General Hospital, that's McCown Lawrence. You have to go to like see a nurse and sit on a red chair, and then you're moved to a blue chair to get registered, and then you're going into another room waiting for a doctor to come get you. Then you're in the op form. So it's like a step by step. So the whole experience of them saying, oh, David Hunt, him, he, him, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I'm Rainbow, please call me she, her. Like, I'm tired of repeating myself. It's not my job to teach you. Like, it's obviously like, okay, so like for a transgender person like myself, and others are different than other people, like when it comes to transgender people, but I would correct the person once, and that's it. Like, I'm not gonna keep going on and on, because it gets so tiring, and it's very frustrating. It's like it's like a yak back. Like I'm repeating. So when the doctor comes in and says, oh, so I see your chart, because I was treating a strep throat. This was way before the pandemic. And it was very nasty, and I couldn't speak. I was talking I wouldn't say like a chipmunk, but it was really bad. Like with me.
Yeah.
He comes in with the chart and says, oh, so David Hunt, I see here on your chart that you're diagnosed with retardation and whatever. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, no, it's intellectual disability, and I go by Rainbow, and I go by she, her, please. So then he put the IV in my arm and attached to a machine that I have to carry. And I'm sitting in the waiting room until the IV is all finished for like the antibiotics for the strep throat. Then the nurse comes in, David Hunt, how you doing? And I'm like, oh my God, it's Rainbow, she, her, please. And there's people in the waiting room looking at me like, who's David? What? I see a girl here, not a guy, right? And I'm like, then it happened again. So after that, I'm like, you know what? I just ripped the damn IV out of my arm, and I'm like, I'm walking out. So I'm like,
Mhm,
enough is enough.
mhm.
And it's just so extremely frustrating. And it's like now when I go to doctors and stuff, I tell them if you don't come in here, sorry, whoa, sorry, if you don't come in here, I'm thinking about me, not me. If
We've
you
all
don't
done that.
if you don't come in here for a rainbow, I'd rather just stay at home and just be sick.
Mhm.
Like, I swear, I'm
Totally.
done with it. I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And then I'm finding out now that for people that are transgender people to go through the reassignment sex surgery, for bottom surgery, is that I think it's the medical book or something, whatever you want to call it, is saying
Mhm.
that it's all in the person's mind about the surgery.
Mm.
So it's not that I want to do it, it's because their mental health is making them do it. That's what that's
Mm.
what I was told and from a friend. I'm like, no, it's up to the person if they want to do the surgery or not. It's not their
Mhm.
disability or it's not their mental health. It's their choice. And you know,
Mhm.
and so like I'm convincing people I want to do it. I want to do it. Not what the stupid book
Mhm.
says. I want to do it.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like I don't know. It's so much like I don't know what the word I'm trying to use. It's so much false information out there and stigma towards
Mhm.
transgender people accessing any kind of medical services. The pronouns are always the issue, and
Totally.
it's always the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. It prevents us from getting care. Like, as you said, like you're like, I would just rather stay home. I'd rather just not access healthcare if you're not
Yeah.
going to respect my like entire being. I'm telling you who I am, and you can't even listen to that. How do I trust you with my healthcare?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jay, you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to respond to about what Rainbow was saying?
Not really. I just kind of wanted to add some. I feel like,
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, medicalizing our genders and our like ourselves on the one hand, and then, you know, not giving us medical care for our disabilities and our illnesses on the other hand. It's about control. It's not about care, right? It's about control over us and our choices and lack thereof, rather than giving us actual care.
And like,
Yeah.
one of the main reasons I moved to Vancouver was to be able to access like trans healthcare. Coming from Alberta, like it can be years and years before you see the one psych in the province that you have to go, and you have to go for multiple sessions. And I think at this point there are more like informed consent clinics available.
Mhm.
When I moved, it was years of waiting, and my life couldn't wait that long. It was like I either transition or I'm gonna die.
Totally. I want to say we have Saling in the space. Thanks for joining us, Saling. If you would like to give yourself a brief introduction, we've been asking for name, pronouns you want in space, what land you're coming into the filibuster from, and what you would spray paint on Parliament if you could.
Hello. I'm just going to pull up my email because I wrote this all out, and then I don't even have to think about it, and I have all the things. No brain.
Turn
just
it
vibes.
Just vibes.
Hi, my name is Saling. I use she, it pronouns. I'm tuning in from the stolen ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. What I would spray paint on Parliament would be fuckos, fuck off. It's like widely applicable. And I think everyone can bring a little bit of what they want into it. And I am a Asian person. I have short hair, and I'm sitting in front of like a white wall and a picture frame full of sunglasses. Hi.
Fashion. Hi. Yeah. So I've got another question in the chat. It's more of a, it's just being aware that, you know, we're always going back and forth between joviality and, you know, humor and lightheartedness, and then also back to the heavy topic of the hour, of MAID. So just holding space for that, going back to that heaviness. Kim has said, again, saying, I'm very afraid because MAID has been flipped into a pro-choice issue in mainstream thinking and framed as a freedom in sort of libertarian circles. And then it has been co-opted as a pro-life issue by certain religious groups, making it really frustrating to discuss. People have been so led astray by political disinformation, and I hate the disinformation, but I still don't want them or anyone they love to access MAID because they feel hopeless. It's weighing on me every day. Yeah, I have some, like, quite a bit of experience with, like, the religious groups framing it as like a sanctity of life issue, where that's like not at all where I'm coming from. Like, it's not like, I don't think people have autonomy over their bodies and like choices. It's about the fact that we don't have meaningful choices. And that, you know, if we're to have a society where we can decide for ourselves, you know, this is the end for me, we have to be like fully supported in any other choice we might want to make, and we're not. So yeah, I really feel that, Kim, of you know, the way that it's being co-opted by these groups and the ways that it makes it very complicated to discuss.
And it's just so Christian.
Fellow Jew in the house.
Like, come on. Like, there's so many. The assumption that we're all going to have the same feelings about death.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
What?
It's the same thing as, or like very connected to like Roe v. Wade. Judaism says that, you know, life doesn't start until a first breath is taken. So, you know, after a baby is actually born and is a baby. And so abortion, by all rights, is a Jewish religious belief. You know, that's not going to be a salient.
Preserving the mother, which is not necessarily something every Jew agrees with, but it is part of Judaism.
It very much is. Like, the sanctity of preserving that life comes above all else. Yeah, it's, you know, it's very much the so-called like Christian hegemony, the mainstream Christian infiltration of all of our systems, so to speak.
I think that
I was just going to say something silly, and then you can go back to the serious thing. I saw a tweet where somebody was like, some kid in their life is having difficulty with learning about like the Christian idea of when life starts. So this kid had started arguing that life doesn't start until you have a gut flora.
Beautiful.
I love children. Jay, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, just like listening to you and Rabbit talking about like the pedestal that like the society is built on of like Christianity, and like how colonial that is, and bringing it back to like Rabbit's land back and away from these systems that are built on the religion that helped colonize like where we are.
Totally. Yeah. Mitcholos, I don't want to like single you out, but like we've all kind of had more of an opportunity to like talk about personal experiences and stuff like that. And I said at the beginning, like if there's anything people want to specifically bring to the space, anything that you were thinking about as we were coming up on this evening's broadcast, personal disability experiences, experiences with poverty, stuff like that, like feel free to step into that space as you wish.
My main thought approaching these filibusters during my actual disability application, little fill out section, and then I transcribed it.
Yeah, totally. I hated filling out the application because you have to like talk about your worst symptoms and your worst experiences, and like that's how you get approved. And it's just like so demoralizing.
Demoralizing, humanizing, disgusting.
Yeah.
It's been such a long process for Mitcholos.
Totally.
But
yes.
Open to you.
I think it was a long ass time before I held the thing in my hands. And then, and when I finally got to write it out, this is it anyway. So I guess a content warning and a trigger warning for murder, suicide,
Thank you.
So this is what I wrote. Undiagnosed skin and nerve condition, chronic pain, daily flare-ups since I was 10 years old. Foster care experience after my mother attempted murder-suicide. My childhood, parentage, and home situation was chaotic and constantly changing. Same with my school, social, and medical history. I am autistic. I was born on reserve, a racist, genocidal, centuries-long abuse, meaning I inherited the Indian Act budget, meaning I am impoverished for actions that are not my own. My father left before I was born. My mother was poor, and she attempted murder-suicide with me as a child. I was taken to many different foster homes and families after that. My first foster home had holes in the roof because it's a Federal Reserve home built at the inception of reserves and never updated due to Indian Act budgets. My first foster parent died young of liver failure, needing to spend her final years away from her family on reserve. I was sent to more different foster homes before the age of 9. My next foster parents were newlyweds who went through their separation and divorce in the year that I lived with them. My next parent was my biological mother, who just gave birth to my half-sister. We lived there together until mother's debt and anxiety led her to alcohol. And so I wrote, and the pigs, and then I censored it with this tiny little scribble. It's just one single line through the word pigs. And the next word is police. And the police taking me and my sister to separate foster homes. I went to more foster homes before the age of 11. This is when my skin and nerve condition began as a chronic and daily pain. I was babysitting my sister at her new foster home when my skin felt like it was being set on fire and poked with needles. And it occurs when I sweat, when I raise my body temperature, when I need the washroom, and when people look at me. And my next foster home was with my mom's mom in another Federal Reserve home. My quote unquote parent and guardian was an elder by then, retired from work. So she was less mobile and less energetic. And I was 12 when I moved in. So I was living on the reserve. And hitchhiking to and from school and work is insanity. It is needlessly difficult. I failed to make it physically to schools, and I failed to make it to work as well. I had seasonal jobs that were laborious, so they caused my flare-ups in my skin and my nerves. I have emotional fits as well. I get angry. I moved in with my mother in the last year of her life. I was out of school, I was unemployed, and we lived on reserve. I felt too mentally ill to live with alcoholics and drinkers, so I decided to move back to my grand's house. And the last thing my mother ever said to me, she fell to the floor crying, "My own son is leaving me." And she died of a broken rib and an infection a week or so later. And my grand died not a few years later. And I was still out of school and I was still unemployed. So I ran away from the reserve forever. And the foster care system stole my life. It confused my medical and social condition. And the Indian Act oppresses and violates and kills me every day. My condition is an undiagnosed skin condition and being brown on stolen land. And that's what I wrote.
I respect the hell out of that and out of you. Thanks for sharing.
Happy to share.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
For sharing, and ballsy as hell. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sending that in as your disability application is amazing.
Yeah.
It's awful that you were put in that position, and it's also amazing that you did it, frankly. Yeah. The disabling effects of colonization that you highlighted in that, and of, you know, the ongoing colonialism of the reserve system, of the foster care system. And yeah, it's, I know that, you know, last week, Sunny connected the immigration system to ableism that migrants face, and have the ability to perpetuate. And yeah, this is another part of that legacy that you're bringing to the table here. Gabrielle said that, you know, there's a lot of love and thanks from attendees for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some, yeah, I feel like I didn't quite understand all this when I ran away in 2014. I didn't understand nothing. Just running away from the situation.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's so many different programs for both residential school survivors and both foster care children, even
Yeah.
What I'm waiting for is this reserve program. It's a lot more just not just discourse, but actual programs.
Tangible support.
Obviously, in my lifetime, that's what I ran away from.
Totally. Yep. And the way that support is cut off when you hit 25, like any support that did exist is cut off at that age for a lot of programs. I don't know, to me it says like, if you haven't gotten your shit together by this age, then we don't want you. And you're not like a valued member. And yeah, that's particularly egregious.
Yeah, you're 25 and you're not producing capital. I don't care.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever take a minute and just like kind of try to wrap your brain around how much stuff you've learned since you were supposed to be dead, and at which time you were supposed to be dead, and then you're just like, okay, so from between then and now, like I don't even care what I did up to that point because I was waiting to die anyway. And I'm like, but I did learn stuff then, and that still counts. Also, just like even if I just take the last time I was supposed to die, from then to now, and like the way that we move in community getting so disjointed by people going missing out of the way that we teach each other and inhabit each other's spaces and gain from each other, and then to know that they want to actively just pull bricks out of that wall so that we can't support each other.
Totally.
It's honestly evil.
It is.
Cheers, bro. I'll have some water to that.
I've been drinking a liter of the most caffeinated tea we have to manage this migraine. I'm just grateful. Hydration break.
Mine's club
Interpreter
soda.
got in on it too. Yeah. Yeah.
Club soda.
And yeah, you missed some of, particularly where we started off, Mitcholos. I brought up some stuff about how much I've been thinking about intergenerational poverty and trauma and how that informs and creates disability, but also how disability informs and creates poverty.
Totally. Yeah, very connected. Yeah.
Very connected.
Yeah, I think.
Very connected to mental health.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about how colonizers and colonization is an effort towards whiteness's immortality. And like there's a lot of separation created by colonial systems to, remove death practices and grief practices because like whiteness doesn't want to grapple with that. Whiteness as a culture, we want to imagine that we're immortal. And we want to create systems that reinforce that. And that is in itself also disabling. To not have grief practices creates a whole wealth of cognitive pain. And yeah, it is another like intergenerational project as well. Yeah, for sure.
Intergenerational, like how like learning about nostalgia more being used as a tool. I always think of like there's always going to be some sort of refraction, some sort of loss generationally. It's something you have to take care of very well and pass off better. I don't know. Yeah,
Totally.
the generational project is very evident where it's like you want to soothe any kind of pain. People search for that without realizing
Yeah.
that, you know.
Yep. Yeah, it's very much, like drug use, whether it's illicit or prescribed, is part of that. And when it's illicit, we're not respected as like that's not respected as a disabling experience as well. I really think about how illicit drug users are removed from disability conversations and community because it's like the wrong way of being, when it's another way to soothe that like turmoil and that grief that isn't allowed to be present. I'm lucky enough to now. Oh, go. Pardon?
I said thanks for bringing that up. That was also on my mind.
Totally. Yeah. I'm lucky enough to recently have access to therapy. And something that's on my mind every single time I'm in therapy, and also whenever I'm not, like honestly, it's always on my mind. We were talking about it last night, is how feeling your feelings is actually like physically experiencing your emotions. It's not like thinking about them. It's not thinking like, oh, I'm sad. It's I miss this person. It's like actually feeling them, like in your chest, in your gut. That is so difficult because we're not like in most mainstream Western colonizer society. We're not taught to do that. We're not taught. And those tools are like actively removed from communities that might have them. Yeah, it's like the amount that I cry at the moment, like a cumulative 8 hours sometimes, because I'm just like feeling all of these emotions that I have not felt for most of my life. I just, push them down and intellectualize them. But actually feeling them just means feeling them.
If I'm intergenerationally poor and I've been steeped in cortisol for several generations, do you really think I want to visit the inflammation hell that is my own emotions?
No, I highly doubt that sounds like a good idea whatsoever. And, sometimes we're in spaces where it's not. Sometimes we're in moments where it's completely unfeasible. And we just need to continue repressing for a little while. But
So everyone should make us less mad, actually. They should stop enraging us so we can take a nap.
Hello, government. Our message to the government, please stop this because you're raising our cortisol levels again.
Pissing me off.
It's upsetting me and my homegirls.
Yeah. I just want to say that I love being in space with disabled people. I think that it's really important, and I really want to echo Kim's previous question / statement of like, how do we reach people who don't have these online spaces available to them? It's not a problem we can solve in the next 14 minutes, but it's something that I think all of our networks and efforts and personal conversations can be reflecting on and trying to address.
Yeah. And like how much like homeless people and drug users and poor people and queer and people of color, like all of that, were already viewed as less worthy of space and life, and tying that to made of like, well, now the state that already hates us and already tries to erase us has a great excuse to permanently remove us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I messed up. I raised that point to someone on Twitter yesterday who was making the point that, housing people is cheaper in reality than, all of this security and policing and all of this stuff that disappears people and invisibilizes people. I was like, that, it's a fair point, but also the state has recently latched onto the best cost saving measure of euthanasia programs, being the cheapest way to deal with undesirables. This kind of space is like one way that we can combat that, but it's the economy as a talking point for why we should have accessible and affordable housing and all of this stuff is not currently the best argument for these things, because euthanasia is so much more cost effective, and the people who are prioritizing the economy over, what the valuing disabled lives are going to, by and large, agree with euthanasia.
Dr. Bonnie Henry.
Ooh.
Name a name.
I also want to say, people with access to resources like money don't spend it in a way that makes sense. To make the economic argument for things that are good and right and ethical and full of care hinges on the assumption that people with money make decisions that make sense. Even in an economic sense, they don't, because they don't have to. That's what power and privilege allows, is just ridiculousness and absurdity, and the ability to steamroll anyone who points it out. And I think our absurdity and ridiculousness is a little bit better. There's not the undercurrent of eugenics to it, so I'm a fan.
Off to a great start.
Yes, let's not do a eugenics. It's a good policy. Yeah.
I think also not shying away from it. There's lots of moments in conversations that I might have at work or in the neighborhood where my brain pops up, oh, this is definitely about that. And I have that sort of choice. And no, I don't always decide that that's the conversation I want to have. I'm not saying you can't ever choose not to, but there's actually a lot more opportunities in daily life to talk about this than it seems like, if you don't shut yourself down because it's an unsavory or improper topic. And I feel like the experiences that I've had talking about it with people who genuinely didn't have a clue have been really rewarding.
Totally.
The arguments with people who came because they already had an axe to grind about it are a lot less fulfilling, but there are a lot of people who just don't know what to think, because our government does a really good job of making sure no one knows what's happening.
Totally.
So maybe I can encourage people to be less afraid of that conversation, because it probably will go badly once in a while, but there's a lot of people who think of themselves as good people and are trying to do the thing they think is good. And while that's a really icky, rocky first step, it can let them have a moment to consider that they don't have as much information as they think they do.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
I'm really grateful for the like crypt space and crypt community that I've found, because it's been a really good like practice space almost, you know, like it's the place where I can put my training wheels on and nobody makes fun of me, and I don't have to shy away from these things that like people who don't exist in a disability space tend to shy away from. And the more I get to practice, the more I get to have a space where I can just say what's on my mind, like with content warnings, with little heads up, because we like to do that for each other. But the more that I get into the habit of that, the easier it is to bring that out into the rest of the world.
Totally.
Mhm.
Yep. You're at 6:52. I am going to, Gabrielle has suggested, and I really love the suggestion, and I think it's actually very fitting in our this final note of like crypt space and the potential for like holding each other through these conversations and approaching people or like being open to these conversations. Mia Mingus is writing about COVID on disabled people's deaths and interdependence and stuff like that. So I'm going to read that. And then we'll take a moment to, you know, spend some time thinking of people who have been killed due to, you know, systemic neglect, systemic violence, including things like MAID, things like colonization, anything else that's coming up for us. Just sitting with those memories and that grief practice. Don't yet know when the next broadcast will be, but if you keep an eye on the Disability Filibuster Twitter, that's Disability Philly, FILI 1 on Twitter, or go to disabilityfilibuster.ca. You'll catch updates and be able to tune in for another broadcast. Doing this for as long as funding for access is coming in. You know, there's a lot going on. So yeah, I'm going to read Mia Mingus's piece now. You are not entitled to our deaths. You are not entitled to the deaths of our loved ones in the name of capital, privilege, and normal, quote unquote. You are not entitled to our silence about our pain and suffering and the wet tar grief that envelops us. You are not entitled to our fear and terror at the worsening conditions and chaos of this pandemic, wondering if we will ever be able to safely leave our homes again. Disabled people are not disposable. We are your feared present and your inevitable future. We are what age and time promise more than anything else, and this is one reason you fear us and why you have continually pushed us away and hidden us. You don't want us too close, don't want a daily reminder of difference and privilege. You don't want to have to change your life for us. We are to be landfilled away, conveniently forgotten about so you can play pretend without interruption. My people are dying and terrified, and you don't seem to care. You don't seem to care because you don't see them, see us, as your people too. When you talk to me about racial justice or housing justice or healing justice or gender justice, going to insert reproductive justice, who exactly are you talking about? Whose justice are you fighting for? Because it never seems to include disabled people, or if it does, it is only in theory, not practice, only to make yourself look better. Or it is only when disabled people are in the room or when we initiate the conversation. Interdependence is ultimately about we instead of me. It understands that we are bound together by virtue of existing on this planet. Interdependence is generative and grounded in care for one another. It doesn't live in obligation or entitlement, but rather a loving willingness and a sacred giving. Interdependence cannot exist in scarcity, competition, comparison, domination, or greed. It flourishes in abundance, appreciating and honoring difference, collective care, and collective access. Interdependence can exist between two people or 6 billion and everything in between. Thank you, Mia Mingus, for your words, as always. Now, if you ever get to see this. Thank you to Gabrielle and Catherine Frizzy for creating this container of the filibuster for us to embody crypt care and interdependence and to brainstorm new ways of making that happen in the world. And I'm thinking of a lot of people who have not had the opportunity to embody that care and that love and that experience. I hope some of them do. Thanks to everyone for tuning in tonight. That's all we've got.
Really glad and thankful to be invited to be a part of this again and have a sit in such a room with all these amazing people and hear everyone's thoughts.
Totally.
About it for a long time.
Thank you,
Yes.
Chiu, for hosting.
Thanks to Fenrir for doing back-end tech. And thank you to both of our interpreters. I know one of you had to leave early, but still huge thanks. And also to our captioner tonight. And to all of the access workers out there. You know, we love what you do. We deeply honor it. All right. We could end